Next, from Springfield, we talk one-on-one with Roger Heubner of the Illinois Municipal League about the constitutional amendment that voters will decide on the November ballot. We'll hear why the Municipal League says the amendment would help to keep future pension costs under control. This runs about 20 minutes.
Roger Heubner, you're the Deputy Executive Director of the Illinois Municipal League, and we appreciate you joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you, Terry, for asking me.
One of the issues that is going to be facing voters in November on the ballot, and I think one that people have not focused on and there's not been a whole lot of coverage on, is a constitutional amendment called Constitutional Amendment 49, although it's not literally the 49th Amendment. But be that as it may, we wanted to explore with you what, in your estimation, the Amendment A would do, and B, why the Municipal League is in favor of it passing. So let's just start there. As the voters go in to vote for this, first of all, you, the Illinois Municipal League, would be in favor of its passage. Why is that?
The amendment deals with the pension article of the Constitution. And what the constitutional amendment asks the voters is, should the General Assembly have a higher vote threshold to pass future pension benefit increases? We think that will create more bipartisan support if it is there to increase pensions in the future, but it certainly will bring everyone into the process, both Democrats and Republicans, that they have a say-so in anything that changes in the future.
For the simple mathematical reasons that if you need a 3/5 vote, you're going to have people on both sides of the aisle approving it.
That's correct. That'll make sure that that dialogue occurs and that both parties are working together.
Now, who came up with the idea? Why do we need, first of all, the current way of increasing pension benefits is a simple majority, correct?
That's correct.
In the legislature.
That's correct. It takes 60 votes of the House and 30 votes of the Senate.
And when we talk about an increase in the pensions, whose pensions are currently increased by the legislature that would be affected by this?
You know, actually there are 15, 16 pension systems in Illinois that range from what is known as the Big Five pension systems, covering teachers throughout the state of Illinois. There's the General Assembly, there's the state employees, there's the judges, and university employees are commonly known as the Big Five that are out there. But you also have Cook County, Chicago, and then you have a local municipal that's statewide called the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, plus downstate police and FAR funds. So the General Assembly, as far as the public sector, controls almost all pensions.
And again, this is not just for state workers, this is for the some local workers as well.
Absolutely. This amendment would apply to everything from the state of Illinois employee down to the municipal employee, maybe in a comparable job but working in your local community. It would apply to teachers from the city of Chicago to teachers down in Cairo, Illinois.
All right, so that's who's affected, government workers across the state.
That's a great way to look at it.
We currently have law, the legislature can increase the pension benefits for those recipients by a simple majority. This amendment would, in your estimation, then raise that to a 3/5 majority instead of a mere 50%. And why would that be a good thing?
Well, the most important thing when you look at public sector pensions in Illinois, I think almost universally, except for maybe the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, they're in funding dilemma. They need some serious adjustments as far as getting their funding level on the appropriate level. This amendment at least makes sure that it makes it more difficult to do any more harm by increasing those pensions, because you're certainly not going to solve the funding problem if you make the problem worse by handing out more benefit increases.
What do you say to those who would argue against the amendment and say, you know, America's a democracy, majority rules, the majority is 51%, to require a supermajority is anti-democratic?
Well, actually, the Illinois Constitution Amendment is probably as democratic as you can get, because we're really asking the voters, the taxpayers who pay these costs, we're asking them to participate in the process and let the public opinion weigh in. Do you increase this vote threshold? Do you send a message from the voters to the General Assembly that established and can increase these pensions? Is the taxpaying public weighing in? And if they vote in favor of this and it passes, it sort of seems like the pocketbooks affected has sent a message. So that's very effective.
As far as, and we had talked a little bit about who would be impacted, what about those who are currently retired and receiving benefits? Would they also be impacted?
It does not affect current benefit recipients whatsoever. This deals with future pensions, but it may deal with the retiree if the General Assembly were considering going back and improving a person already in retirement, their benefit. So they've already got their deal. They've already have begun drawing the pension that was provided them. And unfortunately, over the years, which has kind of led to some of the pension funding problems, they've went back at the encouragement of those that are interested in that, such as the public sector representatives, and they have increased pension benefits for people already retired, which throws nothing but debt. It's outright debt thrown into whatever pension system they do that.
Some of the critics of the pension, or the amendment I should say it's poorly written with some terms that are not defined, and that it would open up unnecessary ambiguities in the process of approving or not approving pension benefits. Do you find that to be a legitimate criticism as far as you're concerned?
I don't put much stock in that argument. Right now, the pension code is very small in the Constitution. It's one of the briefest sections, fewest words. This would actually make that identical pension section of the Constitution, it would lengthen it incredibly. There's great specificity in this amendment as to what the General Assembly is saying it wants to do to itself. I mean, keep in mind, this is the General Assembly asking the voters, we need you to make a determination if we need more restraints put on ourselves because of past practices. So the General Assembly is actually asking the voters, I mean, this passed both chambers overwhelmingly, they're actually asking the voters, we need you to amend our Constitution to restrict our past practices. That's a pretty bold move. I haven't seen it done much in Illinois.
Is it, as some people have said, it's help me before I spend again. Is that somewhat, I mean, it's making it harder to increase the pension benefits in the future?
That's, they're asking that restraints be placed on themselves to make sure that they make sound financial decisions going forward for not only the taxpayer but the retirees. It doesn't do any good to have a retirement promise that you're worried about. Is it a solvent promise that's been given me, or is it a less than fluid promise I have?
Now, what if they want to do, for the sake of discussion, alter the pension benefits? You have this constitutional question of whether you can reduce the pensions in one way or another. And there's been the debate about saying to people, if you pay for your health care, we accept what we want to do on health care, then we're not going to cut your pensions benefits. Or I should say, if you accept the pension reduction, then we'll continue to pay for your health care, was the proposal. And that was put out there as a way of trying to reduce the cost of pensions and get around the constitutional prohibition, which is already in the Constitution, about not reducing pension benefits. I know this gets a little
Right.
sometimes hard to follow. But in essence, the state is looking for one way to reduce the cost of pensions. They've already, for the new employees coming in, the so-called Tier 2, they already get less in pensions than those who were working prior to January of 2011. But they're now looking to somehow get a handle on some of those costs of those who were working prior to 2011 and their pensions. Is that fair enough?
That's correct. This amendment doesn't affect the efforts that they're dealing with the existing either retirees or members of the pension system. Even the Tier 2, as you referred to it, adjustments were for future employees after a January date if they became employed. This amendment doesn't amend the section that deals with the supposed constitutional guarantee, as it's often called. That is actually that very brief section that speaks about pensions in the section before where this language, if approved, would be added. So this is really dealing with, as you said, help me so I don't overspend or overpromise or overcommit in the future. And if I do, we've all worked better together to get there.
Lastly, from your following the legislature for years, how big of a problem has it been over the years that the lawmakers vote to increase pensions? Because this is what this amendment would do, as you're saying, would prohibit. It wouldn't mean that they couldn't do it, but it would make it more difficult for them to increase the benefits. How much of a problem has that been from your point of view over the years, and to what extent has that contributed to the unfunding of the liabilities within the pension systems?
Well, I've been around pensions 3 decades, and so if you look at those last 30 years and you break it down, in the first decade, it seemed like passing a pension bill every so often was almost like a birthright. It would, hey, it's been a while since we've done it, we've got to do it. In the second decade, we began having the 5+5 plans. You know, let's let workers work 5 years later, less, and we'll give them 5 years of service, 5 years of age, and for this grouping, we'll really give them quite a pension deal. The third decade of that has now transposed from caution to outright concern. So the last 10 years of pensions has been one of the reality of what they're confronted with, whether it's bonding houses telling them, whether it's pension funds selling assets to make payments, whether it's poor investment returns. It's all come home at once. So the next decade is really the question I look forward to. The next 10 years, they either straighten this out, they use greater caution, or I don't think that guarantee is going to be worth much.
Well, Roger Heubner, we appreciate you taking the time to explain your point of view and why you support the amendment. Thank you for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you for covering this issue.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.